My name is Byron Revels. I am the co-founder and CEO of Abra, and we are reinventing the way that companies purchase services and products from suppliers. The challenge that we're facing, or that a lot of companies face, is that generally in the sales process, suppliers and salespeople are overpromising and under-delivering. And within the context of B2B relationships, where procurement is frequently very impactful in securing optimal terms for a company making a purchase, they're usually brought in too late in the process, and that's because internally there's a disconnect between the business stakeholder kind of leading the charge on a new initiative and the procurement team member who's kind of like waving from the sidelines to try to get their attention and try to help them negotiate. And so that delayed engagement from the procurement side leads to a situation where they're brought in, companies have already negotiated terms with a particular stakeholder, and they can't really do much. And so it leads to compromised supplier performance overall, which is a $2.5 trillion problem within the global Fortune 500 alone. So what we've built is an AI-powered buying and supplier management, performance management platform that attends sales meetings. So think bot sitting on your meetings, but capturing sales performance, Gong for buying teams, if you will. It also then takes in proposals, contracts, other collateral, and pulls out any commitments so that by the time a company is ready to contract with a particular supplier, procurement and the business stakeholder is able to neatly hand over all of the different promises. So after 15 years in sales leadership, this is kind of a sales leader's worst nightmare in some ways. But from the customer delivery side, it's actually a really great thing there. And it really helps kind of surface everything and make sure that expectations are aligned on and that you start things off on a good foot. So within the platform, those commitments then populate a dynamic supplier scorecard that you can think of as a digital team member. It sits there and documents really the entire history of the relationship between a supplier and a buying company. And then for stakeholders, there is the ability to interact via Slack and Teams, so you don't have to think I got to go into one more platform and log more information. You can interact with Abra as a digital team member. Let's say that the janitorial service didn't show up last night and you're an office manager. You can send Abra a Slack and say, hey, Clean Pro documents it on the scorecard. That way, when you go back into your renewal, you actually have a really holistic picture of performance and the ability to better negotiate as the buyer. Then there's the ability as well for the platform to proactively reach out to different stakeholders. So procurement, business stakeholder, someone on the finance or legal team that are tied to the scorecard when there are issues noticed in reporting that's being ingested in the platform that they need to address. And so effectively it acts as a force multiplier for procurement teams. It ensures that they're receiving peak supplier or vendor performance. It shortens the time window between issue identification and resolution, so there's a governance aspect to it as well. And then you're able to increase revenue capture and savings on an ongoing basis. So from a company perspective, started the company back in May. We secured our first paying customer, Greenlight Financial, out of Atlanta in August. We applied through a competitive process and presented to the Procurement Innovation Roundtable, group made up of Fortune 1 and 500 procurement leaders, and received 5 matches from that, a match indicating that they want to seriously investigate piloting or contracting with you. So we got 5 matches, averages 2, you're not guaranteed any, and those were DoorDash, Workday, Walmart, Synchrony Financial, and Warner Brother. So we're in conversations with those companies among a slew of more mid-market groups. Also raised some money from VC out of Raleigh and some friends and family. So we're kind of at that inflection point where we're just really building to fine-tune everything and make sure that we can support hypergrowth. The ask, we are looking for additional design partners. So if you're a procurement or finance leader looking for a way to very easily save money in an environment where you're being asked to cut headcount, we can help you out with that. And we'd love to talk to you about ways that you could pilot or use the platform and see how it can make a difference for your organization. So if that's you or someone you know, feel free to shoot me an email, byron@helloabra.com. Thanks so much. Right.
The baby looks pretty. It's very cute.
Thank you. It's kind of like a hybrid sales pitch, and not really like a true investor pitch, but somewhere in between.
Congrats, Byron. That's a lot of traction in just a little bit of time. It's a big deal. The first thing I want to ask, if possible, is who are you? Why are you in this space, and how are you tied to the thing that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I've mostly worked for early stage startups for the last 15 years, generally as the first sales hire, pre-revenue and in most cases pre-product market fit. So in addition to just being able to sell, I was coming in working with our product and teams and customers to figure out like what we actually needed to build to scale faster and to make the business successful. The other thing that I really care a lot about is actually like delivering on promises. And so as a salesperson, it always pained me to see where people were overpromised things that were never really delivered. And so, like at my previous company, a San Francisco-based fintech, where I was the first sales hire, I had a dotted line from customer success because I was so involved in making sure that we were actually delivering to our enterprise customers what was promised. And so for me, that was like really the driving factor, was seeing instances where customers just weren't tracking things very easily, and leveraging Gen AI and a software wrapped around it, you could really really solve that for them. Co-founder, CTO, most recently spent a number of years at Okta, software engineer. He saw it from like the buying side, where he was having to deal with procurement internally, dealing with vendors and trying to manage them, and his team managed them, and it was just this massive pain point. And we've known each other for 18 years and have worked on stuff together in the past. So this was the idea that was interesting enough that we felt like we could, reasonably take on, and felt like the timing was good for.
That's awesome. And tell me more about like your ideal customer size. There's got to be some some magnitude of size of a company that this is a pain point enough to actually pay for it SaaS-wise.
Yeah, VCs love horizontal SaaS, right? So we're generally seeing that like it's definitely a good fit within like Fortune 500, where there's a lot of complexity, big procurement teams, category management teams, where they have this need for like internal coordination to be automated. We also have some groups that are in the 200 to 500 employee range, like Greenlight's 700 employees. And so on the smaller end, they view it as a way to not have to add additional headcount on the procurement side as they scale up as a business. And then for larger companies that are cutting headcount, cutting cost, they view it as a good way to make like their existing teams more effective. As far as industries, generally companies with a larger like indirect procurement spend, so think non-manufacturing, or like heavy supply chain focus. Like if the VP of supply chain is more important than the procurement lead, then like probably not as good of a fit. That being said, like we're figuring out where Walmart fits into that, because they're obviously heavy on that side. But yeah, so we're still figuring out like where exactly we're going to like verticalize and fall into, I would say.
And I think personally, I've struggled with procurement teams in the past. I'm not sure that everyone's like hoping to spend more time with them, or hoping to. People have had frustrations about how long that process can go. Can you describe? Is there anything about this that could be supportive of the relationship between the business teams that are on the calls with them and the procurement teams themselves?
And you're speaking to like internally or as a salesperson? Yeah. So, it's funny because I've felt that way, in certain cases. And then I've also seen where like a lot of times certain teams try to keep procurement at arm's length, like HR is a big one for that, marketing and others, because procurement just doesn't get it. And so what this does is this allows for procurement to be involved in the conversation, track notes about the, sales process or procurement process that may be going on that they're not directly involved in, so that they can see that and figure out like where they can be most helpful. So there's that aspect to it. The other one is on renewals, for procurement, figuring out like, hey, like we've gotten, we know that this group has an auto renewal. Abra's able to notify them that it's coming up, that there's a 8% increase in there, and they're able to ping the business stakeholder to say like, hey, like would you like some help negotiating this? I see in the notes that there were these issues over the last year. So if anything, yeah, procurement might be a little bit more kind of in your area of the business, but CFOs like that, so yeah.
Well, Byron, I think you did a great job. Clear to me what your product is and everything like that. If I were to give two pieces that I would give you for the next time you're pitching, I think it would be helpful to have an example of where something has gone wrong in the process up front, and like a tangible example of a company that didn't have this in place and what that really cost them. And then I would highlight more about you and your team and how you guys are experts in doing this. And eventually would love to hear more about the long-term vision about where this could get to beyond just this first MVP. But great job.
Thank you.
Yes, so great feedback. I would echo most of that. And part of the pain points that you experienced, I've lived real time as well from both sides. And I think anybody who's had to negotiate with procurement, like, why is there this wall I need to hurdle to get this agreement done? Procurement sometimes has, right, maybe preferred vendors. Is that addressed in Abra as well? So as a salesperson, right, who's wheeling and dealing and making commitments with this preferred or this vendor that I may choose, then internally you have the discussions, right? You mentioned the listening, and that's where the negotiation internally happens. So can you expand on that anymore?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like we're specifically staying away from being like procurement orchestration technically right now, or like a contract lifecycle management system. So those are kind of like the two existing pieces of tech that are generally involved at this point. And so, like, to your point specifically, what it's really attempting to do is capture like any commitments from vendors you may be evaluating or suppliers you may be evaluating, so that when you do select one that you want to work with, not only do you have like full details on that relationship like sitting in the scorecard, but you have the ability to pull in like perhaps other areas or other items into the conversation from another supplier. Like, hey, this other group had committed to providing this type of response time for us. Could you also match that? So in that way, it's helping to kind of like increase the volume of like service level agreements and commitments that are being tracked in the platform. But then it's also still able to track things outside of a contract. So it's kind of like a living scorecard for that relationship.
Do those notes need to be taken in the Abra platform where the bot is listening, or is that happening in Salesforce?
So at least for how it is right now, it's either the bot or you're sending it like Slack or Teams messages to submit that. Or you could do it in the platform. We don't have anyone like directly downloading stuff or directly entering stuff in the platform right now, though. We prefer for them to use Slack or Teams.
Okay. So that may be something to keep an eye on as you grow, because sales team leads and the people making the commitments and wheeling and dealing are notoriously, kind of want to keep some of those conversations hush hush and then give the bare minimum to procurement, right? Yep. And so it's incumbent upon the people who are notorious for the least amount of documentation, right, to make the product work the best. And so that may be just one thing you encounter in the sales journey.
It's interesting. So we have one group right now that I do think will sign a contract with us. They're looking at it for the service delivery team. So they want to use it to actually like track their own commitments to clients, and then ingest their own reporting as well to match up against whatever SLAs that they had agreed to in the contract. So it's kind of,
That's interesting. Maybe onto something there with the $2 trillion in waste. That's where my mind was going as the supplier in these agreements. Mm-hmm. What is my risk for being for non-renewals? And so where I can see this could help on the original business case, there may be something there in terms of retention and value. How are you selling it? How is this monetized?
So right now we're selling it as like a B2B SaaS subscription fee. The other option that we do have some proposals out for is for a supplier paid model, where basically like suppliers that are considered strategic suppliers, which is generally like 10 to 15% in a large company, they have to like pay like an annual fee to keep their information up to date, similar to like the InfoSec model with companies like Audit Board and others, which we may kind of like get into covering. But yeah, so that's it. It's B2B SaaS, but then we're also experimenting with the supplier paid model.
Well, thank you. Great pitch.
Thank
Good
you.
information.